What the fuck is going on at the Mint?
It's as if they are trying to. I mean, you could argue they've been the model of inefficiency for a long time. They're trying to perhaps uh, just get the littlest amount of silver, like the two-part interview or three-part interview. Jack Sermon, I think his name was,
Yep.
and it's one of the two go-to interviews that I would tell anyone who wants to know what's going on to listen to. And in it, when he said, "I was told by my superiors to only produce just enough Silver Eagles to not create a backlash, a a what am I trying to say? A media backlash or a something that we're going to have to try and quell." Well, that's obviously what they're doing, and because everything else premium wise has reacted far differently than the American Eagles, which have maintained their premium, not high premium, but higher than everything else simply because the demand is or the supply is not meeting demand. And which is weird because there's plenty of product on everything else, but Silver Eagles have really been that one item that has maintained demand, but the supply just isn't where we would expect it to be. I don't know. I guess I take a lot from that interview that you did with Jack, and I never thought I would hear a Mint official say he was told by his superiors, and I don't know who those superiors would be. I doubt it would have been the lady that used to run it, the HR lady, but I think it would be more along the lines of the Treasury Secretary who would have given him those instructions. But yeah, there's no question really. I mean, you look, they haven't even made a Platinum Eagle yet this year. And you can see that they're very, very inefficient, but it's almost as if maybe they are restocking the American government, perhaps, and using, stupid excuses and lack of transparency and the admission by Jack that, yeah, just make as little as possible without creating a backlash that they're doing. Maybe they realize, along with all these imports and deliveries into the United States, that we have allowed this to become a very detrimental situation to the safety of the country. That we are woefully understocked in things like gold and silver, and that's why they're delivering it into the system. Maybe it is the Treasury that is behind all of these big deliveries, and on one hand, we can't make the admission that we're woefully underprepared for the future as it pertains to something as strategic, not just industrial, but strategic as silver, and at the same time let it all go out the back door to the American public. So, I mean, that would be the only thing that would make sense to me, Bix. I can't think of any other reason why they would go to such great lengths to keep Silver Eagles from the public when it's in the law, the charter of the Mint, that they're supposed to produce as many as is demanded by the public, which they clearly haven't for the better part of 5 years. I would say it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.50 or 60 cents, right in that neighborhood over spot. And this is where it gets crazy because when they run out of product, as they've shown the propensity to do continuously, and the primary distributors have it all, this is where the markup becomes absurd.
Right.
But that goes both ways, buy and sell. It's not at my level, it's at the level one above me, the primary distributors. We're an authorized reseller, which is one step below the primary distributors. They're the ones who will spend 50, 60, $70 million indiscriminately on this stuff, on Silver Eagles. Take everything that they can give on allocation. They all do that. So the Mint's now out of product. And in essence, they then become the market makers and control the price. So I want to say the Mint charges between 240 and 260, somewhere in that neighborhood, I would think, to the primary distributors right now over
Yeah.
spot. Yeah, they can sell a third the silver and make the same amount as selling it all in
Yeah.
Eagles.
So they're
And
gouging. They're price
it
gouging.
it reminds me of the cop that I saw in the gas station not too long ago, around dusk, and one of his lights was out, his headlights. I said, "Sir, your headlights." I said, "Good thing I won't get pulled over." I laughed and he laughed, but it's true. It's like, who's going to do anything about it, I guess is the question. I think that's how brazen this has all become. But yeah, to your point, Bix, um, on everything, there's far greater demand up top, but you can see it. You can see it through the massive purchases, the massive deliveries, and then the repatriation, whether it be taking it off the exchanges or central banks bringing it home, removing counterparty risk. And to your point, yes, I mean, the demand is still pretty good on the retail level in comparison to where it was most of the time that I've known you over the last 20 plus years. But by the same token, it represents such a tiny, tiny bit of the mainstream. Um, they haven't realized it yet. They really haven't. And so, yeah, what is very available and flush right now can very quickly change. We've seen that happen. Silicon Valley Bank failed. We added 14,000 clients in 45 days. That's 4 years worth of client acquisition in 45 days. But, that's really the kind of environment we find ourselves in, where the public isn't thinking, they're not forward thinking, they're not looking at this. They think the road to retirement is paved with stock certificates and mutual funds, which, to my point earlier, you have a record participation by the public in equities right now. At the same time, it's record accumulation on physical metals by the insiders. And so they flip-flop. The insiders are out in equities and in commodities, and the retail public is all in equities and really pretty much out in as it pertains to commodities, at least on a large scale. So what does that portray for the future? Well, I'll leave that up to everyone else to decide. But we need people like you to keep giving us this information, the facts, the figures, and being there to hold all of our hands, because it is tough. It's tough for a lot of people to see the counterintuitive nature. What we see today, where oil was way down, the dollar was up, gold and silver, well, at last I looked, silver was up a little bit, but gold was down. Here we are filming, in the middle of this escalation in the Middle East, and gold's down $35, silver's up 4 cents. But things are counterintuitive to the way we would think it would be to react in terms of reaction. But that's all done as part of the gaslighting, as part of the cartel 101 playbook. I, for one, thank God every day for people like you who are making my job a little bit easier to try and get the information out, because you're right, these are challenging times for most people, and harder yet, the mainstream media doesn't do anything to open people's eyes to what is happening. So that's why we need you and others like you and me to continue to scream. I don't know how many people are listening, but I hope enough to, we help just a couple. That to me is great. And the ECB warned that gold is a threat to the global financial system. I'll just read something to you real quick. I'm sure you saw this. Last month, the ECB, the European Central Bank, warned of increasing counterparty risk in gold derivatives for the euro area. In the May edition of the Financial Stability Review, the ECB added that a significant share of these gold derivatives were over the counter and not centrally cleared, leaving actors exposed to counterparty risk. As you said, the LBMA is not an exchange, it's an over the counter system, I guess you call it. The big point to take on board is an official recognition that the stand for delivery obligations on COMEX are behind the crisis, and they continue. Since November, warehouse stock has shown 26,470,000 ounces have stood for delivery. Eurozone banks have swapped gold for paper, and the gold is disappearing in deliveries. Behind the ECB's public concern is a far deeper one. It is as close as we can get to official warning that the gold paper game is coming to a very nasty end, likely to drive gold measured in paper currencies far, far higher. And incidentally, the same problem exists in silver, but without the central bank participation, more of a commercial bank, which means it's an existential threat to some of these banks if the shit hits the fan. Now you have Singapore getting into the game and opening up a market, a gold market. They want pricing authority to shift towards Asia. And I think that's what is happening, whether it be with the Shanghai Metals Exchange, now an exchange that's being developed in Singapore, the BRICS exchange. There's no question that I think they've realized for a very long time that the pricing power, the West monopoly on metals pricing and settlement is something that they realize is a scam. And I think that buyers in Asia aren't just looking for better pricing. They're seeking autonomy. They're seeking the ability to set the prices. This is a big deal that I think people are missing. And even when the BRICS grain exchange was developed last year, the guy that is behind it said, we in the global South produce and consume more grain than the West does, but we can't control the price. It's done on COMEX. But with the development of this grain exchange, that will change. I think you could say the same thing here about the move eastward. And that's one of the scary things about the recklessness of the Western policies that are allowing the exchanges to be drained and flowing eastward to countries like India, countries like China, countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia, and all of the countries that understand what silver represents, standing for delivery. And maybe by the grace of God, someone in the Trump administration said, look, we've got to do the same thing here. We're in big trouble. Hence all of the deliveries we're seeing. I don't know, Bix, I know you had me on your show, but I'll ask you, I mean, when do we see the price suppression end? What does it take for this to be overwhelmed, for these banks to realize that this isn't just stupid, it's an existential threat to their survival? Are we getting there? Are we almost there?